We are back on magical chapter 89 for the chosen journey. He is the bullpen coach of the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. He is the one, the only big money grip, Steve Karsay. I'm Jonathan A. Cohen. And as promised last week, we are back to discuss, I think, one of my favorite, if not my favorite topics, and discussing Cooperstown, the Hall of Fame. And we have the ballot. It's been out for a little while. And people are buzzing saying who's going to make the Hall this year and are they worthy, not worthy. We're kind of not going that route today, Steve. We're in that, kind of genre where it's all the guys still, you've played with them, you know them, you probably were teammates with some. And very curious, I wanted to kind of put you on a different kind of spot today. And it's like, I'll say the name. What's the first thing that comes to your head? How about that?
All right, fair enough.
I'll give you my take of if they're going in or not. Steve will say, I'll give you my 2 cents of what I know. So this ballot, okay, so let's start off with there's three first timers that are of note. This one, there was buzz a long time ago. I don't think there's any buzz anymore if this guy's making a haul. He is the one, the only Adrian Beltre. Adrian Beltre. So, Mr. Beltre, you hear that name, what's the first thing that comes to your head?
Professional. Listen, played against them obviously in the same era, but never played with him. But listen, at the end of the day, the things I've heard about this guy are tremendous. Tremendous teammate, obviously tremendous defender, tremendous player. Played for a long time and just went about things the right way.
He's one of those guys that, without looking at the stats, you're like, okay, he was very, very good. Is he Hall of Fame worthy? And then you start looking and crunching numbers. He was so consistent on both
Yes.
ends of the field. My
Mm-hmm.
Lord, his bat, his glove, this guy did it all. I was so just at first glance having watched him because he was just so steady, You don't need a guy who's going to hit 70 home runs every year. He's a guy who just simply did it and did it well and consistent. And you look at the doubles,
Yes.
you look at the home runs, the RBIs, the gold gloves. Oh my Lord. If this guy's not a first ballot Hall of Famer, I don't know who is. I think he's in 1000%. You remember as far as did you ever strike him out? Did you ever get a home run or too far back?
Too far back.
Too far back. Okay. So we'll say that one's pretty easy. The next one, who for me I think is a sure one, and I know the Twins fans are going to agree with me, is Mr. Sideburns himself, Mr. Joe Mauer.
Yeah, I would say great bat to ball skills. Like this is a guy who, when he stepped in the box, you know what you're going to get.
Great,
Wasn't going to
great. What
strike out
skills?
very
Sorry,
much.
it cut out there. Great.
Bat to ball skills,
Mhm.
contact hitter, developed some power. Like caught for the first quarter, right, or half of his career until he had the injury, and then ended up at first base. But I think injuries derailed him a little bit. He had some concussion stuff and things like that. But a gamer, a guy who you knew what you were going to get when he came to the field. Again, not a guy that I ever played with, but was around.
Another guy that just, he looked like to me what they call him like lunch pail guys.
Yeah,
Packs
yeah.
his lunch, goes to the park, does his job. He's a guy never heard 1 ounce of any negativity, controversy. He was just very professional about the way he went about it. I also kind of favor those one team guys, like the Cal Ripkins of this world, Tony Gwynn's of
Yeah.
this world. There's something magical about playing like 12 years, 15 years, 20 years with one team and being synonymous with that team. And Joe Mauer, I think you had to watch him and appreciate the quality of what he brought to his team and how valuable he was to his team, plus how great of a catcher he was, and still such a consistent hitter. And it's one of those things that now I'm going to go to the other end of it. I don't want to look at the stats. I don't even have to look at the stats. Having watched him and appreciated for him, he was one of the greatest catchers of his generation. So for me, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, period. Done.
Yeah, it should be interesting, but I agree.
Now we start to get into a little bit more difficulty. So we got our last first timer, and this one, the internet's buzzing about him. I see it happening, but it's how each of those writers and voters, criteria wise, a guy that we all really love to watch, and he's Mr. Chase Utley.
Yeah, like the first thing that comes to mind is gamer. right? Like he's one of those gritty guys who goes out there and it's you know, it's get dirty. I'm going to do anything to win. Move the ball, move a runner over, play hard defense. Uh, swung the back great. Like he's a guy that when you play against him, it's like, yeah, do I really like this guy? But if you play with him, you're like, all right, I want this guy on my team all the time. So, without knowing the numbers and having dived into like what he has done offensively, I think that, like you said, this is a little bit more of a difficult decision on how the writers view him, but without a doubt, had a tremendous career.
You and I can close our eyes, and without looking at the numbers, in that generation, you try to think on top of your head who are the top second basemen of that era. I think it begins and ends with him. He's on a very short list there. And that's where I don't know how much it factors in, Steve, but for me, I think the position does matter. If you were the top person among your peers at your position, I think that does have to factor into something.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know what goes through the minds of the Baseball Writers Association and how they, go through the numbers, uh, analytically to kind of compare them to some of the other second basemen or other guys in his genre that would be going to the Hall. But it should be interesting, that's for sure.
So that's tier one. Tier two, these are holdovers now, and I had three holdovers that I thought of note. One is Todd Helton. Do you recall ever facing Todd Helton?
Uh, I don't recall facing him. I might have when we played interleague play, but again, early in his career, I'm an American League guy. He was a National League guy. There was no really very much crossover. Him being in Colorado and then me being obviously in Oakland in the American League, and then being hurt for a few years during his time there. So don't remember facing him, but again, one of those guys who on the surface you look at and it's like, wow, lunch pail guy, blue collar, comes to the field, know what you're going to get defensively, know what you're going to get offensively, and then obviously I think this is the elephant in the room is like playing Colorado, right? So how do you factor in and statistically kind of compare that with guys who have similar numbers who didn't play half of their games at high altitude? So again, tough for the writers to balance that out, but I'm just glad I'm not making any of those decisions.
I will take a look at one point and take a look at his away numbers. I'm curious because I'm pretty sure it's one of those things like, let's say, I'm just throwing out there, but let's say at home in the first career, he hit 350 and on the road, he hit 310. And let's say he hit 400 home runs at home and hit 200 on the road. I recall he was still a very good hitter, and I feel bad for those guys. And he didn't ask for that. That's how it was set up. That's the altitude. That's the ballpark. And
I agree.
I'm tell you could bring almost any player into that era and still have him play. They're not going to put up his numbers that consistently. He was still amazing for who he was. So I think people will recognize that. And I think you will see him one day in there. A guy that I've sang a different tune on, I was kind of back and forth on this one, but having crunched numbers, looking at his comparables, I want to ask you in the mind of a reliever because Billy Wagner, give us your take on Billy, because you've done Billy's role. You know what it's like to close out games. Imagine for as long as Billy did it, for the quality that Billy did it. He was pretty incredible, was he not?
He was great. I mean, again, without digging into the numbers, seeing his strikeouts per nine and saves compared to other ones, how many innings he pitched and things like that. Um, that would help me out a little bit more to determine, like, do I really think, or is it just one of those guys who's just below great, right? I mean, listen, there's no doubt, it's tough to do what he did. And, he was one of those, guys in Houston that just from the left side who threw hard, commanded the ball pretty well, and was able to put up fantastic numbers over his career.
I'll never forget that Pujols home run. that one. He will, if Allen Iverson is always about practice, practice. Billy Wagner will always talk about that home run, but that was one match. That ball's still going, by the way, but it was,
Yeah, it was hit pretty good.
I've never seen a home run hit like that. That was incredible. You're looking, by the way, folks, at the two members of the Andrew Jones fan club here, because I think if we had votes, pretty sure we talked about this one in the past. And Andrew Jones, for what he did, I'm a little surprised he's not in already. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. Andrews was a tremendous player, hard worker, super talented. I mean, tremendous outfielder. I mean, I've never seen anybody play so shallow and be able to track down balls with ease, with such ease when they were hit over his head. He was just very gifted in that area to be able to read the ball off the bat, take great routes, and be able to get balls that maybe some guys today just wouldn't even be close to. So again, without looking at the numbers offensively, what has he done over his career, how consistent that was. But, another guy that it's really hard not to look at him and say how great he was and does he have an opportunity to get in?
I brought up before the comparables of if Ozzie Smith is in, Omar Vizquel is in. And when I come back to Billy Wagner, Lee Smith is in, Billy Wagner's in. Then I like using the comparable factors, and I look at who is actually in and what they're about. And I know it's different eras sometimes, but you look at it and you look at those numbers, you're saying, man, I can see it now. So I'm still waiting for my Hall of Fame vote, Steve, but I don't think it's coming in the mail anytime soon.
Well, he was one I did play with, Andrew. So in Atlanta, so seeing him on an everyday basis and understanding, what he did and how he went about it is impressive.
So having spent time with him in the clubhouse, shaking the man's hand, talking to him, if you had to one or two words to describe Andrew Jones, what would you describe him as?
Smooth, cool, quiet, but big time competitor.
And always seemed very respectful. Like if I've watched interviews with him, he just seems very respectful. Yeah, he was humble.
Yep.
A man who he's been accused of many things, but humble's probably not. He's the only Gary Sheffield. And I remember meeting Gary Sheffield back when he was a rookie with the Brewers moons ago, and him telling us that Uncle Dwight told him not to sign autographs, and Dwight being Dwight Gooden, obviously. The chef, at the end of the day, he played on a lot of teams. For a guy as talented and the numbers that he moved around a bit, and you look at the totality of the numbers, and the man had a great career at the end of the day. He did. And I remember it because it was him and Griffey. Him and Griffey were 1 and 2, and people talking about who's gonna be the better player at the end of the day. Everybody's got those comparisons, right? In every sport, when you come up together. And Sheffield had nothing to sneeze at the end of the day. I think if anything else, it was his confidence helped him to be as strong of a player and work as hard as he did. But it's that same confidence that maybe not everybody understood. Did you ever play with Chef? Did you ever?
Yeah, Chef in New York.
Okay.
Oh no, great. I mean, listen, came to the Bark every day to play. Right, like he definitely was a grinder. He was one of those guys who wasn't going to get cheated at the plate. Had a unique stance. And yeah, waggle of the bat. But boy, could he turn it on inside fastball. Like you couldn't sneak the cheese by him at all. And he was ready for it all the time. So he was fun to play with. I had a short time with him, but at the end of the day, I would take him for sure on my team.
Well, then I guess I got two questions for you. Number one, as a pitcher late in the game, he's a guy coming up the bat. Probably not that excited, right?
No, of course not. I mean, when a guy can hit a fastball like that and he can do damage, I mean, you got to be careful with guys like that, especially if they're hot or if they're in their prime and they're going through a hot streak. So yeah, of course. I mean, he's one of those guys who, for any pitcher, you have to be careful about.
Hall of Fame voters are listening in right now. They say Steve Karsay. You were in the clubhouse with him. Give me one or two words to describe Chef. How would you describe him?
Boisterous, outgoing, let you know what he's thinking at the time. So Chef wasn't afraid to speak his mind, and that's what makes him who he is.
For the aura that was Chef, never heard of him being a bad teammate. It seems like
No, not a bad teammate.
people like to go to war with him. He's a guy you want in
Yeah,
your lineup.
absolutely.
All right, we're down to our last three. Carlos Beltran, go.
Yeah, I mean, again, never played with him, but tremendous player. I mean, on both sides of the ball. Played in a few different spots. Was came up with some big hits. Like was Johnny on the spot many a times, and was clutch. So it's really hard to say anything bad about the way he played the game and how he went about his business.
That series with the Astros, he was it was like playing a computer game. It was I've never seen anything like this in my life. Like he was as automatic of a hit as you get. Like the ball looked like a beach ball to him at that point. Like wow. And it was a really fun guy to watch on both sides. Like, defensively, the guy was incredible. He was a magician out there.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I know this guy you like a lot. I know you know him pretty well, and he is Mr. Andy Pettitte.
Yeah, tremendous guy. Like stand up, competitor, uh, always wants the ball. And listen, another guy that always started, it seems like game two and game six of the playoffs during their run and came up with monstrous outings for the New York Yankees to keep them in series and to push it to another game or even up the series. So, this guy, he's the top of the top when it comes to character, when it comes to just an overall gentleman of the game. And but saying that, he was the one of the higher competitors that I ever played with.
I always marveled how a team could let him walk away. I know there's money and there's family considerations, everything else, but you got a player like that on your team and you're not able to re-sign him. And any team that got him, like in his generation, I close my eyes, Steve. I can't think of many other pitchers I'd want starting a playoff game for me than him. If there's an elimination game and he's pitching for me, I'm feeling really good about it.
I agree. Like I just said, if the Yankees were down 1-0 during that stretch, he was game two starter. It was 1-1. Like he delivered when it mattered most.
And we had Pat Combs on, former MLB pitcher, and he had his book, right? And his forward was by Andy Pettitte.
Yes.
And talk about how Andy Pettitte is a man of God and a family man. And at the end of the day, people get bumps in the road and situations happen. The one thing I'll say, from and this happens, in all sports, but from Andy's perspective, anything that ever came up, Andy always took accountability for himself, didn't try to blame others. He was forthright with everything, and he handled it the right way, And think about any of us in any of our industries. When something comes up, you notice how the people that don't get ahead in life are the ones that seem to blame others for everything, and the ones that do get ahead are the ones that say, "Hey, I'm going to look in the mirror and I'm going to be accounting for who I am." Andy was like that, and I think he owned up to where it was. And at the end of the day, baseball Hall of Fame, folks. I'll say this on my personal note, is about baseball accomplishments and what happened on the field. And my Hall of Fame has to have an Andy Pettitte in there. Like it feels very empty without him. So I look forward to the day where he does get in. And if my money was riding on Vegas, this man is getting in one day, and that'll be a fun induction speech to listen to because he's a great speaker.
I hope he gets in. Like that would be one of my favorite, reads. If I picked up a paper, looked on the internet, and saw that Andy got into the Hall of Fame.
Our final list name on the list is one of Steve's and I's favorites. Actually, we have discussed him at lengths off the air and his candidacy, and he is the one, the only Bobby Abreu. So Bobby Abreu, the Devil Rays back in the day kind of fell asleep at the wheel there a little bit with him, and he found his way to Houston, Philadelphia, and you look at, the one name that came up was Tony Gwynn, right? And what Tony Gwynn was of his generation. And you marvel at Tony Gwynn and what this man accomplished, right? Like you've sent me stats. I've talked to you about it. And It's like, the man did not strike out ever, ever. It's incredible. And he was a hitting machine. If you take Tony Gwynn as the hitting machine and you take Bobby Abreu as the walking machine, and you look at their stats and take aside the hits and walks and then take all the other stats, they seem like they're the same person almost. It's one of those things that it's a different generation and understanding, but any team at his peak, any team would have taken a Bobby Abreu hitting number. I mean, I think number 2 would be an ideal spot for him because he's on base machine. And I can't say good enough stuff about Bobby Abreu.
Yeah, he was a journeyman, right? Like he bounced around a lot, but everywhere he went, he was consistent and put up numbers, and those numbers added up to a really fine career. You know, is it obviously good enough to get into the Hall of Fame? I mean, obviously not up to this point, but you know, I think if they dig in and get closer to, you know, the analytical portion of it, they might find something there that gives him a little bit of bump. But at the end of the day, we'll see how that goes.
Like, I don't know the numbers exactly, but I would say, Steve, that I have a better shot of going to Vegas and playing the slots and hitting 3 jackpots in a row than playing MLB baseball for 15 to 20 seasons. Like, you've talked before about how difficult it is just to play one game in the show, just to make it to one game. When somebody's making it for 15, 20 years, so many things have to go right. And, you know, you got the Burt Blyleves in this world that the guy, I think he ended up playing 22 seasons, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere
Yeah,
around there.
yeah.
And for a pitcher, and you know what? If somebody was fairly consistent and was able to make it that long versus somebody that, let's say you got the Ralph Kiners of this world that had 40 home runs a year, but only played like 9, 10 seasons, I see value in both, you know, both
Mm-hmm.
because there's something to be said about sustainability being able to do that. And Bobby Brito played for a lot of years, was great for his teams. And I hope to see him there. You ever recall facing him on the mound?
I don't recall facing him either.
If he did, I bet you he took a walk more than likely. Like his strike zone.
Probably right. I mean, like, listen, I have a hard time remembering yesterday. Never mind, you know, 20, 25 years ago, facing certain guys. There's certain things that stick out, but you know, overall, thinking back about certain guys and certain teams, sometimes just doesn't come to mind.
The Hall of Fame voting is going in different directions. People are opening themselves differently in how they analyze players and what they value, and looking at WAR and looking at defensive versus offensive games and speed, etc. And I think over the next 5 years, a lot of people that got overlooked, we're going to see more and more people going in, and that's a good thing. And it's a big honor at the end of the day. I've watched the induction ceremonies, and you know, somebody you think was very cocky and somebody that even at Ricky Henderson, this world, when they're there, it's really humbling to be among the greats of the game and watching that. And that's a beautiful thing. It's an honor for them, their family. Think about, Steve, every single coach, from your personal experience, those high school coaches in elementary school, and people went to college, university, and you played in the show and the minors. Every single person who ever touched you, when that person makes the Hall of Fame, I feel like those people along the journey go to the Hall of Fame as well.
Well, there's no doubt about it. Like, listen, as a player, when you get to the big leagues, no matter how long you play, there's so many people that touch you along the way and teach you something. It's not one person, you know, and I learned that very young in my coaching career is, you know, you have a guy and you start off with that guy and then you pass him to the next pitching coach up there and then he touches them in a certain way and then he goes to double A and that guy coaches them and then triple A and big leagues. Like, so there's so many people involved and, you know, as a player, sometimes you don't realize that, but when it all comes to a head at the very end, if you're that good and you get into a Hall of Fame and you get to reflect on things like that, you start to realize, well, this guy helped me here. This guy helped me here. I was going through a rough patch 5 years into the big leagues, and we made this adjustment with this coach, and he helped me get to the next level. There's so many people that you know are involved in the maturation process of your career that you know, you just know who it's going to be.
I've been at NHL games. I've been at MLB games where at the end of the game, let's say in an NHL game, a player salutes one of his high school coaches or his college coaches and hands them the game puck. I've seen an MLB game where a coach throws to the player and it's the player that he coached. And now this kid is now in the big leagues. and those coaches are bawling their eyes, like bawling their eyes. Like, they're coming from a small town and they knew the family, and seeing their protege in the show, whatever level of sports it is, it's must be the most unbelievable feeling.
Yeah, it's got to be like, right. You feel like you're just a piece of what that guy is to where he has gotten. And, if there's just one little bit of knowledge you gave him or something you said to him during the process of his career, and that stood with him, whether that's being gritty, whether that's being competitive, it doesn't matter what it is, or a small little tweak in their mechanics or their swing, and they're involved in it. It's a special moment for those coaches to understand, hey man, like, I'm super proud of these guys because as coaches, that's what we want to do. We want to develop these young men into leaders. We want to develop these young men into people of the community, and we want to develop these young men into the best baseball players that they can be to achieve their dream. And it feels really good when you see some of these guys get that opportunity.
And this is a great ending for this episode, because these are players that you've played with or played against. And Steve, as now transitioning, your life and been in coaching for several years and come back to the game, you will start to see over the years those players going into Cooperstown that you touched as a coach as well. And that's going to be a pretty cool feeling as well. So I mark my words, it will happen one day. And you may even be in that induction ceremony and they'll give you that wink,
Yeah,
Josh Hader, 2035, Cooperstown. We'll see. So,
fantastic.
and you know what? You told me before about a human being that he is, and working with him in Milwaukee, and that's one of those things. You work with a player, you see where they mature, and it's always been you've always sparkled your eyes when you talked about working with him together and seeing where he went, and now you'll have your proteges in Anaheim, and the journey will continue.
Absolutely, looking forward to it.
He's Steve Karsay, the bullpen coach of the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. I'm Jonathan A. Cohen. This has been The Chosen Journey. Please hit the subscribe button, like button, and send your comments for Steve Karsay as always. And we'll see you back soon on The Chosen Journey.
See you soon.